And now two other stories. The United Nations has designated today, the 3rd of December, to mark the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. The theme for this year's anniversary is amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for an inclusive and sustainable future. The theme recognizes the importance or the important role that persons with disabilities play in creating a more inclusive and sustainable world for all. It also emphasizes the importance of the participation of persons with disabilities in decision-making process that affects their lives. Now, for a wider look into the plight and rights of persons living with disabilities, I am now being joined from the U.S. state of Indiana by a disability rights advocate, Oluwafemi Oladunni. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start from the conversation that I had with a disability rights advocate earlier as well, who is also a person with a disability. And we were touching on stigmatization. He did talk about how stigmatization starts from the home. And perhaps that's the place to begin to address it. I wanted you to sort of touch on that before we move to the theme of today.
All right, thank you so much. I think the person that said that didn't, misplace his or her words because we see that these days that even in your home, you are being, discriminated against. They tend to hide persons with disabilities. They tend to, do all sorts of stuff to persons with disabilities. So people are really, really ashamed. Some families are really ashamed of persons living with disabilities that they have in their family. So if we are talking about, like people say, charity begins at home. So if you want to go into society, if you want to go to the nation at large, we have to look at the family and which the person who made that statement was right about it.
Mm. And a lot of people will say, even psychologists, will say that, look, we are first, who we are starts from the home. And so if people don't get the encouragement that they need from home, how then do they become leadership, how then do we amplify their leadership? Speak to us about how, it matters that we start the encouragement from home if we're going to have an inclusive society where people with disabilities matter.
Yes, it is very, very important. Like I said earlier on, what people will say, charity begins at home, and you cannot give what you don't have. So there's a need for orientation and reorientation of families, of persons living with disabilities. Disability is not a crime. The person didn't choose to be disabled. The person was either born disabled or something, or circumstances happened to them for them to be disabled. So families need to embrace these people, needs to appreciate them, and need to help them live their life. And for us to have a sane society that encourages persons with disability, that encourages inclusions, that encourages that help that they can help persons with disability, it has to start from the home. And so we need to start, the government, the various organizations needs to start orientation, reorientation. Some people are aware, but we still need to laud it. We still need to push it out there.
Mm. And I remember the conversations leading up to election. Every time we have election, especially in Nigeria, people will have advocates, advocacy groups come up to say, let's find a way to ensure that people with disability have access to polling units and that they can vote. And that's just one end of the leadership ladder, let alone, giving them, allowing for inclusion for in leadership. How do we address it in a way that we're not just saying, because you're a person with disability, let's give you a ministry or an office that is related to a person with disability, but actually we have inclusion, even across all sectors?
The first thing I would say is that let's even advocate for an office of persons with disability. Do you understand? Mm. If we do that, we can then metamorphose into pushing them into the society or pushing us into the society, because Nigeria as a whole is so bad in treating persons with disabilities. If we have an office specially created for them, If we have a ministry specially created for them, there we can move on to advocate that inclusion must be done. But if we do not have an office that that addresses the issues of disabilities, if we don't have an office that try to orientate people or try to foster the development of persons with disability, the direct inclusion, direct integration might be practically impossible. So there's need for us to start with that. So once we start with that, then we can now move ahead into direct inclusion.
Absolutely. If we have ministries for vulnerable groups like women and youths, then we must have one for vulnerable groups like people with disabilities. Thank you so much for your time. Disability rights advocate Oluwafemi Oladunni.
Thank you so much for having me.